This is an Eyewitness News special report.
This Eyewitness News special presentation, new information in the deadly Gabby Petito case. A medical examiner in Wyoming revealing today the 22-year-old Long Island native was strangled. Her death ruled a homicide. Petito on a road trip this past summer with her fiancé Brian Laundrie in their white Ford van, a cross-country adventure that would take a tragic turn. And good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter of Eyewitness News. We want to get you up to date on everything we know about this case and all of the startling revelations and new questions that still exist. We're going to start with that disturbing but not surprising news today from the coroner that Gabby Petito was strangled. The coroner also revealing Petito was killed 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found in the Grand Teton National Park, found on September 19th. As for the fiancé, he is still missing and remains the sole person of interest in Petito's death. A search in a vast reserve in Florida for Brian Laundrie, where he's believed to have been last seen, turning up so far absolutely nothing. He's been gone since September 17th. Long Island reporter Kristen Thorne has been on this story from the beginning. She's live from Blue Point in Suffolk County. That's where Gabby's family lives, and she's going to begin our coverage. Kristen, I said it was shocking but not surprising. Did this surprise you?
No, Bill. I mean, I think knowing her cause of death, I mean, we've known for a week or two now that her manner of death was homicide. Knowing the specific cause of death doesn't change the fact here, right? Gabby Petito is dead. Her family is hurting. The community is hurting. So, but it does provide us a little more insight into their relationship. We are learning that their relationship, as we have seen up to this point, seemed to be very tumultuous. It seems that the way this would work is that they would fight, get in physical fights, they would separate, and then they would get back together again. Whether this had happened between them before, we do not know, but it is clear that they did have a violent relationship leading up to this point. We did ask the coroner if there were any other bruises on Gabby's body that he saw, and he would not answer that question. He says he was solely focused on completing this autopsy. This memorial here for Gabby Petito is at the entrance to Blue Point, and people, even Tuesday afternoon, were still coming by here to leave items. Her body was found almost 1 month ago, and the county coroner says it took some time to do this autopsy. A, because they wanted to be thorough, and B, because her body was in the wilderness for 3 to 4 weeks, they did have to bring some specialists in. The Teton County coroner in a Zoom press conference Tuesday afternoon would not get into specifics about how he determined Gabby Petito's cause of death as strangulation. He says he believes Gabby was killed at the end of August.
As far as the time of death, we are estimating 3 to 4 weeks from the time that the body was found.
Gabby and Brian Laundrie were last seen together August 27th at a restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A witness reported seeing the couple engaged in a big fight. Later that afternoon, a van resembling the one they were traveling in was spotted on the side of the road in the Teton National Forest. Gabby's body was later found close by. That time period would line up with Gabby's death. Brian is considered a person of interest in her murder. At this point, though, he has only been charged with using a debit card not belonging to him. It was used August 30th through September 1st. The attorney for Brian's family says that's all Brian has been charged with, using Gabby's debit card. At this time, Brian is still missing, and when he is located, we will address the pending fraud charge against him, attorney Stephen Bertolino said. The Teton County coroner says law enforcement did take DNA samples from Gabby's remains. Those samples could be used in a criminal case.
We are only tasked with the determination of cause and manner of death. Who committed the homicide is up to law enforcement.
This is video of Gabby's mother and her stepfather arriving at the memorial in Blue Point Tuesday afternoon. They basically looked at some items. They did not want to speak with reporters, and then they quickly left. A short time later, Nicole Schmidt said on Twitter in response to Bertolino's comments, his words are garbage, keep talking. The FBI continues to search for Brian Laundrie. There have been spottings of him all the way up to the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina, but none of these sightings have been substantiated, and the FBI has been extremely quiet on what they are doing. So we do not know if Brian Laundrie is dead or alive. Bill.
No question, to see those parents there, you're a mom, I'm a dad, the outpouring of emotional support behind you, that memorial there and that tribute, has got to really affect them deeply. I mean, they're in mourning and sorrow, but all these people supporting them has got to buoy them a little bit at least.
Absolutely, the entire community, and you have to think about it. This has been going on for almost a month now, and people are still coming here. Even on Tuesday afternoon, we saw people coming here to place things at this memorial. I wanted to get in the human part before we get into the mysteries part of this, but we did learn a lot today, Kristen. I want to bring in Bob Boyce. He's an ABC News law enforcement consultant and, of course, former chief of detectives for the NYPD. Bob, thanks for joining us once again, giving your insight. We learned a lot today about the timetable here, don't you think?
We really did, and even more crucial, the fact that it was a strangulation homicide, which is consistent with domestic violence homicides. It's either blunt force trauma or asphyxiation, but strangulation is right there. More importantly than that, the 3 to 4 week timeline from where the body was found September 19th, it fits right into August 27th, which is 3 weeks and 2 days. What does that mean? 2 incidents on that day. The last text the family got from Gabby, whether it was her or not, and also the incident at the restaurant, the Mary Pig restaurant. So that's right there. Now, if you look at where that was in Jackson, Wyoming, it's about 46 miles, less than 50 miles to where the campsite was where she was found. Clearly easily traversed in any amount of time that day. So these things are key going forward. The timeline is tight here. Now they're going to do what they're going to do, phone work, to see if they get triangulation on the phones of both Gabby and Brian Laundrie. It's a really key day, evidence-wise.
There's another key component. Kristen pointed out that I believe, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, the charge on the credit card or the debit card was August 30th. So that 2 or 3 day timeline that Bob just laid out fits in very well with that as well, Bob.
Oh, I agree. It's all said.
Go ahead, Bob.
I agree. August 30th is a key day because then he leaves for Florida September 1st.
Right.
So all this kind of fits in. Now, you have to remember Brian Laundrie, if there was this fight between these two, which they've had before on August 12th, if that happened, he had plenty of time for his injuries to heal in that 3 week period after the homicide. So this is really key stuff here that the prosecutors are looking for, the FBI is looking for. Fit that all into a tight timeline, and now you're moving forward very quickly with compelling evidence.
Kristen, Bob just said that fits in well with the concept of domestic violence, and that's the kind of thing you were just describing.
One more time, Bill.
Bob said that the whole strangulation part fits in well with the worry about domestic violence, which you talked about in your story.
Sure. I mean, this has been, it seems to be their relationship here. And I think as parents, Bill, when we talk about that, if you ask the parents of Gabby Petito if they knew any of this was happening, it just wasn't there. They just seem to not have known any of this. Now, they haven't spoken publicly on that, but when we first spoke to them when she first went missing, we asked them, is there any reason for you to be concerned about her? And there really didn't seem to be. Her mother said she trusted that they were safe together. So again, this is a warning for all of us, for all parents out there, that some of this stuff can be hidden, and we really have to watch out for our children.
Bob, I know they haven't charged anybody in this murder, and they certainly haven't done it to Brian Laundrie. But you've seen enough murders as a detective and chief of detectives. There are certain murders that are distanced murders. I've always found that detectives have always told me that the ones that are up front and up close and personal, stabbings, strangulations, that kind of thing, there's a different emotion involved. It's not just the random thing. You don't just random strangle somebody.
No, it involves rage, and it's one of the major motives for homicide. And it's key what also the coroner said today, that evidence was recovered from her body, DNA evidence. Was it taken from Brian Laundrie where under his fingernails, possibly skin cells? That would suggest a fight for her life. We've seen this time and time again. We don't know that yet. They're not going to release that yet, what they have. But that's what I'm thinking when I see that. This is tight. I think they were doing this before on August 12th. This happened again. He was noted in the restaurant as being enraged and hostile. So it all kind of fits into to a point here. Where did this happen? At what point? And of course, that video by those folks driving by of filming the van by the side of the road in Spread Creek Park That's, and again, a crucial piece. It all fits right in perfectly going forward for a case against him.
We're going to talk to a toxicologist in a few minutes, someone who can explain exactly what happened. But just from a detective point of view, when you have a body decomposing that long, 3 to 4 weeks, and doing it in a wilderness that has a lot of wild animals out there, he said it was very difficult. What do you think that means? What did you read from that? It was difficult for him to come up with the cause of death.
Sure, decomposition is a big issue when you're trying to recover evidence under her fingernails. We don't know what wildlife does. I've seen cases like this with only in a few days. This was 3 weeks. This is a long time. So it's difficult to say. He had a hard time, but he was very inclusive in the autopsy. I see he brought a lot of people in, which is what he should have done. So I was very happy with that. He explained that. They take information from law enforcement and they use that as they go forward. I'm hoping that we're able to get something that on Gabby's body that would help us in the investigation.
I was wondering, I was hoping we would talk to you tonight as we were listening to this, because I was listening to the coroner and I'm thinking, do New York coroners hold back details like that? Is that standard operating procedure, or were you surprised?
Oh, no, I wasn't, because he explained it by law. He can't go into too much more. He's just going to give you what he has. Now, he's important, his information, but from what I gathered today, he's important. Now, states have different. There's only 4 things it could be: homicide, suicide, accident, or something of that matter. So there's only 4 things he can say what it was. So it's definitely homicide. It's definitely strangulation, which means probably the hyoid bone was fractured on Gabby, and that's what I thought when I saw it, and that explained a lot. The toxicology is not going to go into. I don't even know if it's back yet, and it may not be relevant at all to the investigation. It may or may not be. But right now, I'm looking and seeing there's enough here on the table to go forward.
Kristen, when you listened to it, were you frustrated, or did you say, or you look at it like Bob did and say, "Boy, we're learning a lot about this"?
I mean, I think so. Look, we all would like more details. We all would like to know more. We would like to know more about that DNA. That was one of my questions. Was that DNA belonging to her, belonging to Brian Laundrie? But you also have to understand, DNA on her of Brian Laundrie, they were in a relationship. So even there, it's very hard for a prosecutor to be able to prove any of this and the manner that this all happened. But also going back to what Bob was saying about how they determined this, the coroner was very specific. The one detail he did give us is that they did a full body CAT scan. That may have helped identify in her neck if there were broken bones, is maybe how they arrived at that.
It'd be interesting to see how they arrived at that, both Bob and Kristen, about strangulation. If the body had decomposed, how do you even begin to get in there with that kind of evaluation, Bob?
Sure, the X-ray on the body would show the hyoid being fractured or broken, and that would probably withstand that time of decomposition. And that's generally what the first thing they look for. If they look for an asphyxiation, it's particular hemorrhaging in the eyes. So they didn't find that. I don't know if they did or not. The key there, when you're fighting for your life, you fight very strongly, and hopefully that evidence, if Gabby did fight for her life and did get skin cells underneath the fingernails, that's key, despite the fact that they were living together.
We don't want to at all presume anybody's guilt before they're arrested or charged or evidence does this, but you as a longtime detective, Bob, have a lot of experience here, and I know Kristen wants to know this answer because we all have gut feelings about this. Signs do point to him as the main suspect here. There's no doubt about that, I assume, in your mind.
Well, he's the only focus of the investigation. You can call him anything you want, a POI, a witness, a suspect, but he is the main person right now. Let's add to the fact that he drove the car away from that location all the way to Florida. Let's add to the fact that he used her credit card or her debit card again after that. He's uncooperative police. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence, and if you collect a lot, it becomes compelling evidence, and that's what we're seeing right now.
I want Kristen to ask you a question, but before you do that, I want to ask you about the parents. If you were on this case, what would you be talking to the parents about?
Well, if the parents talked to you at all, they held back the fact that he left the house for several days. Yep. So I didn't believe for a minute that he's in that preserve, not for a nanosecond. So I think he's on the run someplace, and time will tell how long it takes for the FBI and the marshals to get him in. But so they have not been helpful at all. And somebody you can understand, some of it you can't. So this is where they are right now. again, more phone conversations, text messages, the messaging. As you all pull that up, and you'll see a bigger picture going forward.
Got it. Kristen, anything you want to ask Bob, or anything you want to say about this before we move to the next section?
No, I think also we should point out that the body was really identified, and her stepfather was the one that helped identify the body, was by her clothing. That's how decomposed the body had been at that point. So we know that that's how long, and it's amazing that the coroner, that they're able to figure these things out. And really, this does provide, you know, even for the family, they want to know what happened to her, and now at least they have that information. Bob, do you think there's anything that the coroner knows at this point that he's just simply not able to tell us?
Well, you mentioned before about the DNA. Have they exacted a profile and from her body, and then going forward, they're not going to put that out yet. They're not going to say that because they might not have Brian Landry's DNA. So things of that, and what else was recovered from the body? You know, at that point, the campsite itself was a crime scene.
Yep.
What else did we find? So things of that nature weren't released yet, and they haven't released a lot. To be honest with you, they've been very judicious in how much the FBI has released. You know, to the public at this point, for good reason. I will tell you this: when you look at the two families, my personal opinion, what you talked about before. Gabby's family have acted accordingly. Have been outstanding in this. They've held back their anger. They've talked. They were open. In complete opposite to the Landry family, who's been deceptive in my mind towards law enforcement and the public.
All right. Well, that's you hear from the former chief of detectives from the NYPD, Bob Boyce. I appreciate that. Kristen, as always, great work reporting today, and we had a lot of new information. And what we didn't hear sometimes was as important as what we did hear, and we all are learning from that and trying to figure out what the next step is. But I think we'll uncover it eventually, and so will the police. Most importantly, Bob Boyce and Kristen Thorne, thank you both for a good, insightful discussion. I appreciate it. We want to reiterate some facts here. Police and investigators have been looking for Mr. Landry in that treacherous southwest Florida swamp, the Carlton Reserve. That search appears to be slowing these days. What was once an intense search with ATVs and helicopters and even a dive team now looks like this. No sign of any search teams at the 25,000-acre reserve. Police say it's too dangerous. They say it has waist-deep water in some areas. It's also filled with snakes and alligators. So far, police say they have found no physical evidence of Landry at the reserve, and investigators still don't know exactly where he is today, nearly 4 weeks after he was first reported missing.
Anything's possible as far as where he could be. In 4 weeks' time, there's literally no place in the world that a person that has the financial capability can travel to. He could certainly blend in almost anywhere. He could change his attire completely, change his look, grow a mustache, put sunglasses on, grow a little bit of hair, put a hat on, put a wig on.
He could do all those things. These are among the last images, by the way, seen of Landry posted on his Instagram pages before he returned home alone. Landry has been indicted for using a debit card without permission just before he returned home to Florida from cross-country trip alone. Joining us now, Dr. Stephanie Widmer, emergency medicine physician and toxicology fellow at Northwell Health, and she's also with our ABC News medical team. Stephanie, I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate all your insight.
Thanks so much for having me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks for having me.
Okay, good. And if you could just look at the camera and not me. I know it's hard because it's rude, not to me, but the viewers can see your eyes that way. So tell me about what you thought when you heard all that from the coroner, and what you didn't hear and what that told you.
So I don't want people to think too much into what we didn't hear today. I think a lot of that had to do with law enforcement regulations, the laws in Wyoming, and the fact, FBI regulations, and this is still an ongoing investigation. I think most importantly that we heard what was determined to be the cause of death was strangulation and a homicide. And I think that really tells us a lot. And we shouldn't, focus too much on what we were not able to find out today, because I really think that's a ton of information just right there. Well, we did find out that, before we get into the strangulation part, because I do have some medical questions for you, we did find out that they did get some DNA from her body. We don't know whose it is and what happened. We did find out that she wasn't pregnant. They found that out, and I don't think anyone asked that question. I think he just volunteered it, maybe, or maybe someone did. Whatever. He did say that. Did someone ask the question? Yeah. What's your experience with coroners here? Do they usually release that kind of information? Were you surprised that he didn't release much? No, I wasn't surprised. I think that commonly happens. The laws are different in every state, and this is a very high-profile investigation right now. So I'm not at all shocked, with the information that he was able to give us and was not able to give us. That was pretty much to be expected.
So understanding that most of our viewers, and certainly me, is not a doctor, but tell us what it means to do an autopsy like this on a body that had been out 3 to 4 weeks in the middle of a national park, no one there, except for a lot of animals.
So, I mean, I can understand why for, the examiners and just for the identification process, why this took so long, 3 to 4 weeks out in the wilderness, and not just being out, the decomposition process of a body itself. And then that compiled with being out in the elements and being out around animals. I don't know how disfigured the body was left when it was left there, but I can imagine that this was no easy feat, and the way that they probably found the body. I'm sure made things very difficult. Yeah.
Obviously, does it say anything about how decomposed that body is that they could determine that she was strangled? If they'd just been a skeleton, could they determine that?
It probably would have made it very difficult, but just with the skeleton, with the bones, before, as was mentioned, the hyoid bone, when that's fractured, that can be type of a clue to whether this was a strangulation or not. But this is a science, and the more information you have, the easier it is to make a diagnosis. But if it was fully decomposed, I think it would have been quite difficult. But there are always clues.
Yeah. The animal part of it provides, a sort of wild card that it would be hard for anyone to anticipate what that would mean. But because you're not usually seeing bodies that are exposed to wild animals in a national park, that would make it much more difficult, I assume.
All right, but luckily they are able to kind of backdate injuries and things like that, and in terms of wound healing and stuff, so they can kind of figure out what was done 3 to 4 weeks ago, what was done a week ago, and kind of, I guess, trace backwards and figure things out that way.
When you heard I want to know what your first reaction was when you heard the coroner talk about this. Did you form any opinions or say, "Oh, I wish we knew that information," or did you find out a lot?
No, to be honest, I mean, so being a toxicologist, I like to always hear about the toxicology screen, but in this case, that's neither here nor there. I think we all, or many of us, were kind of assuming that this case was no accident, and really hearing that this was a homicide and strangulation kind of solidified that for many people.
And what was the information that you'd still want to know? I mean, if you could just, sit and just look at the stars and say, I really want to know this, this, and this, what would that be?
I think I would just be interested to know what types of injuries they found on the body and how they came to the conclusion that this was a strangulation, specifically, because while many of us probably believe this was a homicide before we had that information, we all were kind of wondering exactly what happened and how this went down.
He also said something very interesting, and my ears perked up when he said this is in keeping with the kind of domestic violence we see around the country. And that was interesting, I think, because no one brought that up. He brought that up. And he didn't bring up many things without being asked, but that was one thing he did bring up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just strangulation, that's, like he said, kind of in keeping with, he sees a lot of these cases, much more than I will ever see, but strangulation is kind of one of those methods of harming somebody that's associated with domestic violence.
Okay. Dr. Stephanie Widmer, member of the ABC News medical unit, a great unit, and has helped us a lot, certainly during the COVID period of the last year and a half, and plus that. And you're an ER doctor, right, at Northwell on Long Island?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, congratulations. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for being on our special Eyewitness News edition tonight and giving us your insight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. We have put together, by the way, an extensive timeline of all the events we know about leading up to Petito's disappearance and the investigation since then. It is complicated. The interesting today, the coroner said, well, why is this getting so much attention? He said, because Gabby was such a prolific poster on social media, people would follow her. Lots of people followed her, and so that became a hugely popular event. And they followed her once she disappeared as well. All that available on our website, ABC7NY, and all of our streaming apps. And on that note, that's going to wrap up this special edition of Eyewitness News, a streaming edition of Eyewitness News. I'm Bill Ritter. For all of us here at Channel 7, we thank you for joining us tonight. We'll obviously have the latest anytime on the web and online, and again tonight on Eyewitness News at 11. I hope you join us. Until then, be safe and good night.